Let's, okay, hello. We are group three, and we are talking about these two articles today. Um, I would say in the first article I read, I thought it was a really interesting point about the inaccessible student because a lot of the times I feel like as educators, we might have our own biases about like, oh, this kid's parents doesn't care about them, they don't care about their education, why haven't I seen them all year, why aren't they reaching out? And at times I've had this thought too, but that doesn't really take into account of the lack of communication barrier if they're an immigrant family and they have a language barrier. Because I know personally I kind of have an experience about this. When I was teaching pre-K during the pre-K graduation, there was this Chinese kid in my class, and his parents were very recent immigrants, and they did not have the best English skills. And we had all these chairs set out for pre-K graduation. And she asked, "Oh, are you guys having a party?" I was like, "No, it's graduation. We've sent out like 15 reminders." And she's like, "Oh, can parents come?" I was like, "Yes, please come." And that was just kind of a moment of reflection for me as an educator. Like, the thought didn't even cross my mind that his parents are not accustomed to American graduation practices, to this culture of like coming to your kid's school and interacting. And I was like, wow, like looking back, if I had to do it again, I would have pulled her aside and specifically explained what would happen.
I think that's a really good point, Jasmine, and I really like that story, and like real life application. In the first article, I really took away the example of there being an open house and just the emphasis in the open house on like a head count of like how many parents were there and how much information was given out, and that making the open house successful and not really focusing on building relationships during the open house and getting to know the families and really the stuff that's going to benefit the families and the kids and forming teacher to parent relationships and trying to cultivate parent to parent relationships. And then, like the article said, like especially from the perspective of parents who don't speak English or come from those different backgrounds, open house can seem unwelcoming and frightening. And it just made me think of a lot of the ways that I would want to try to cultivate relationships during open house and use that as an opportunity for
Mm-hmm.
good rather than to possibly do more harm, even though the school's trying to do good.
My big takeaways, I know I can't affect school culture or leadership. I'm not a teacher. I'm not going to change the whole school. Again, I'm trying to look for things that I can do in my classroom. And they mentioned four vital core beliefs that we need to have. And I thought, well, if my administration doesn't have this, I can bring it into my classroom and try to reach parents by sort of changing the way I think. And the four beliefs were that all parents want the best for their kids. And being someone that's raised kids, I get that. I know a lot of moms, and we do. That's our a big, huge commonality. All families can support their children, regardless of their. And the article goes into it, how it was proven that maybe I think it was one of the dads only had a third grade education, and but he was able to help his student and support his learner. Parents and school staff are equal partners. There's no hierarchy. We're in this together for the success of your student, and that the responsibility for building these partnerships should primarily be on the school staff. We shouldn't be expecting these parents to just keep reaching out to us and trying to build a relationship with us. It should fall on us. So I'm taking those are the big things I'm taking with me into my teaching experience.
That's awesome.
I think my biggest takeaway, or one of my big takeaways, was definitely one of the reasons for a family being hard to reach being the narrow definitions of like parent involvement and how they wanted to shift it from parent involvement to family engagement and sort of this like who is making the rules kind of thing, which came back to, perspective power. The third one I can't remember right now. Um, and having that in mind that in a lot of non-white cultures and families, like extended family is very important and not just thinking about like the parents. And I think that that also bled over into the second reading where in talking about digital literacy, they failed to account for what was her name? Penny
Mhm.
having a computer at her aunt's house or something. Um, and so her lack of access was like therefore inaccurate in that way. And
Mhm.
um mentioning that in African American families, extended family units are a source of strength, and just seeing that like a lot of these studies are done by white
Mhm.
who do not have an understanding of the cultures that they teach. And I think that like that is something that I will take with me is just, know your kids, know their culture. And it's like that's something this class is overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of like I feel like one thing our cult like a white culture and a white like school doesn't really take into account is just how not only in the Black community but in many immigrant communities this concept of a nuclear family and this nuclear community is so integral to how their homes are run. And I just feel that, oh, your house doesn't have technology. That's not that's like a really like narrow-minded. That's not how everybody's family kind of works.
Hmm.
And we have a few questions.
I can take the first question. So the second article talked about the possibility of requiring teachers to participate in book clubs to increase awareness about issues of culture, race, and literacy. So our question would be, how do you think a book club could do this? So how do you think a book club could increase awareness in current issues regarding culture and races, both within the classroom and outside the classroom, especially about technological access biases? And just thinking about like if you think that the book club would be a good idea, how could you possibly improve the book club or come up with a new idea of how to just educate teachers and help the system as a whole?
And our second question was in regards to the first article where they talked about the Logan Foundation and its impact in working with the community and immigrant communities. And our question about that is how can we make undocumented immigrants feel comfortable reaching out to those local programs? What kind of barriers can we take down for them to feel welcome?